integrity at work is something more balanced, but at a minimum, it is letting your yes be yes. This came out of Jesus's mouth himself in Matthew 5:37 on the Sermon on the Mount. If you said that you were going to get back to somebody on an email, then do that. If you said you were going to help with a project, then do that. Welcome back to Answer the Call, where we help people discern what they feel called to do and practically land a job that's aligned with it. I am so excited and grateful for Audrey's work into this episode today. She and I were chatting and we realized that as we're coming off of a very practical series on interviewing that we just finished, that you probably, hopefully, just listened to and saw and benefited from, we thought, it's time to get back to our sweet spot. I'm not saying we're not practical girlies, but good Lord, we love just digging into the theology of work, the heart and encouragement that we need in order to face our days with courage and a desire to love God and love others. And I think that this episode is such a key part of that, not only just in our current cultural moment, but I think for quite some time, this topic has been building up in us of if you desire to have a chill job, there are some reasons to be careful with that. So we're going to talk about what we mean and why your desire is understandable, but perhaps going to be best placed in a little bit different of a perspective. And so with that, I'd really like to invite Audrey to kick us off with talking about the cultural narrative around work and kind of just like chill, cushy jobs right now. Yeah, Audrey, I'm going to turn it over to you. Hey.
Yes, thank you for that intro, Kelsey. And as you said, this is something that's kind of been bubbling up in us for a while. And the word that we've really been using around this topic is integrity and what it looks like to work with integrity in today's world. We're going to get into a lot more specific language and talking about that chill job, breaking that down. But first, we got to set the stage with, like you said, the cultural narrative around work right now. What do we mean? Or where are we coming from on this? So really in today's work culture, I see it all the time. I'm sure you see it. I know you would see it all the time. We talk about it. And I'm sure the listener, you see it too. What is it that I'm talking about? Basically, this narrative of the bare minimum. I'm going to talk more about what that means, but really, I first want to preface and say that this bare minimum narrative is really, it can be massively damaging to your character without you even knowing it. So that's why it's so important to dig into what it is and describe it. So this growing cultural narrative, it starts by this idea, almost like a victim culture idea of, companies exploit all their workers and corporations make all this money and life outside of work is far more important than work itself, which means you shouldn't work that hard so you can reserve energy and focus more on your life outside of work. All of these kinds of narratives that you hear on your team, with your friends, in a lot of places. And because of all of this, people believe that employees should take all of this back in their time and in their effort by doing the bare minimum. Warming a seat is another way that we can talk about it. But other versions that this bare minimum mentality comes out is in phrases like act your wage, which I hate how quippy and like smart that is in terms of the, act your age instead of act your wage, because it's really dangerous idea. It's basically saying only put in an effort that matches your pay and avoid doing any work that you personally have discerned feels like goes beyond what you're being compensated for. And in the age of inflation, that's a really easy argument to make to yourself to do not.
Yeah. And I think that these have become popular because there's a partial truth in them. Like I can in some ways completely understand acting your wage, but a lot of that is very much up to your personal perception of what you think you should be paid for. And I'm just not sure that everyone has First off, let me just say, if you've never been an employer that has paid people out of your own pocket, you likely are walking around with a inflated view of what your time is worth. I'm just being honest. I'm being completely honest there. And because so many people have like a rent my life rather than own anything kind of perception or experience in life, they also might not have had a lot of leadership or ownership over a team or ownership over a budget, ownership over financial decisions in the business that you're a part of. You might, but you might not have. And when you have that kind of oversight, it really it makes every dollar that you pay an employee mean more to you. And therefore it makes you want to be a bit more humble with what you're doing for your employer in exchange for the wage that has been agreed upon. I'm not saying that you can't be underpaid. That can completely be your reality. I totally understand if that is your reality, but we just don't know if that's real or a bratty assumption that you're making, to be honest. Like, I think community can help you discern that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a good reminder too, Kelsey, that we have opinions here. We have scripture as well that we're going to get into, but we also have grace, and I really want to approach this with kind hearts, having both been in our own situations where we weren't working with integrity, and we'll talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah, I was
So
really, I was and still am dumb sometimes, like for real. I really,
Yeah.
especially in my early career, good Lord. But I think what we're really trying to highlight is the steal from your employer because they're stealing from you kind of jadedness that has entered the chat. We do not like that. That's satanic, honestly. The Lord says to love your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And we have verses to back up that your employer is not your enemy. He or she is an authority ordained for your good, even if they are not acting like it. So we'll get into that.
Surely.
But aside from the acting your wage, you put a couple others on here, like the quiet quitting and just do the bare minimum. There's all these phrases that have been slung around since the Great Recession. Oh, sorry, Great what? Resignation. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm like feeling a little stressed that we're going back into the Great Recession. So I think that's been on my mind. But the Great Resignation, I think, has birthed a lot of these about quiet quitting, which is the trend that you only do what is outlined in your job description without any extra effort. Again, there's a half truth there. We're going to highlight in scripture later, like Jesus himself said, let your yes be yes. And I would say, as signing an employment contract, you have said yes to doing the things that are outlined. And I would like you to feel empowered to at times negotiate with your boss if you feel like you are constantly doing another person's job. That's totally understandable. However, it's important to approach that conversation proactively and transparently so you could renegotiate and define what your yes needs to be. But don't slide back into not addressing it transparently with your employer and just being like, you know what, I'll let that slide and they could just burn. They could just take it. I've seen some incredibly gross things on. I'm not on TikTok, but some people have sent me some things on TikTok of just honestly gross people like clapping back at their boss for like, here's my invoice for the task that you're asking me to do on this email. And I'm like, good gravy. That's gross.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, really damaging narratives that hurt your character and you might not even know it. So quiet quitting and then, just doing the bare minimum is something that we hear all the time. And what we mean by that is putting in the least amount of effort possible or necessary to avoid consequences while still keeping your job. Warming a seat, as we said. And like Kelsey, you mentioned, all of these, there's half-truths in here, and there's real frustration, and there's value in talking through that. on today's episode, or in today's episode, we're going to discuss more about how these narratives have created a lot of confusion around integrity at work. So those conversations are important to dive into. You and I could talk for hours about that, but we want to keep this consumable for
That's
our
true.
listeners.
Thanks for reminding me.
But with the bare minimum, a tangible kind of result of that is something that I saw a lot on consultation calls. I would love to hear you share as well if you've heard this. People coming in and saying, hey, I just need a cushy job. I'm just looking for a job where I don't really have to do that much, but I still get paid well. I just want to work in corporate America, so like nobody notices me and I can take in 100K and, do the bare minimum. And people say this openly without any shame.
Without any shame. Like, it is just obvious. Like, hey, I'll on the McDonald's menu of job options, I would like the get rich for no work scheme. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to overtly find the fat that has not been trimmed in organizations and work there. So I don't actually have to deliver anything. And I will not get noticed for my lack of value and my lack of integrity. Said in other words, that's exactly what it is. And I'm not saying you're not allowed to be burnt out or burnt legitimately by past companies. But please be very careful. That's not actually, this should not be a normal thing to say and hold up as a legitimate option that is acceptable for Christians to want to select for their career.
Yeah, and then it'll leave you unfulfilled. There's so much ickiness that it will leave you with, and it really comes from a place of confusion with a lot of people of what they're trying to communicate. So it can be redeemed. We're going to talk about how it can be redeemed, but that is the case for what the bare minimum looks like, and where there's some really tough things come out of that, and it works in direct contradiction to working with integrity. So Kelsey, can you tell us a little bit more about what do we mean by integrity at work?
Yes, I'd love to, because what I'm not building up to is trying to dunk on you, listener, and say, you know what? Working with integrity is basically working overtime without pay. It is
never
questioning boundaries, never having boundaries. It is burnout city USA. You need to just be okay with that. You need to do like 110% all the time. For us broken and weary humans, that is just rarely possible all of the time. And I'm not even sure that that is completely the ideal. I think that we could work unto the Lord with all our hearts and still not go to the extent of being so unwise to like become hospitalized from a consistent stress, which does happen to people. And that's so hard. Instead, I'd like to issue encouragement that integrity at work is something more balanced, but at a minimum, it is letting your yes be yes. This came out of Jesus's mouth himself in Matthew 5:37 on the Sermon on the Mount. He talked about let your yes be yes and your no be no. If you commit to something on a like micro level, if you said that you were going to get back to somebody on an email, then do that. If you said you were going to help with a project, then do that. If you said that you were going to do something within a certain time, then do that and try your best, with occasional fallen world
mistakes,
experiences of saying ahead of time, hey, I just wanted to send you this email. It's the end of day Thursday. I said I was going to get it to you by end of day Friday. I'm looking at some other things that popped up tomorrow, and I'm realizing that is going to be very, very difficult. Is it okay if I renegotiate this timeline to you to get it to you by whatever new suggested date? Beautiful. It honors the person that you had the commitment to so much more than ghosting them or disappointing them or just making a defensive kind of situation rather than being on offense saying, hey, things happen. Can I get your understanding on this? That puts you in so much better of a light. And also it just makes them, I know for me, it's made me feel so much more loved for like, oh, my word and their word matters. My request matters to them. That even though life happened this week and they're not able to get to it. So do honor your commitments. And that also, rather than on the daily level, can also be on the macro level of when you have accepted a job and on throughout the interview process and in the job description and in your offer letter, you have a scope of that job. Do own that and do it. I had a professor in college that it was my very last semester as I was wrapping up, and he said, hey, I have some career advice for you guys. And he said, show up to work, do work, and then leave. And I was like, wait, what? And he said, you'd be amazed how many people do not do that. They're pushing boxes around rather than doing solving the actual problems that they were hired for, owning the task functions that they were hired for. So be faithful to do what you are being paid to do. Also, I would encourage you to see our episode number 178 on what does it mean to be an A player. And I don't believe that episode is all about being a 110% player. I believe it's like here's just what being a good Christian at work looks like, honestly. So I would encourage those kind of rules to be your new bare minimum. And maybe on the surface, you might be thinking, oh, their definition of integrity does kind of sound like the bare minimum. If you're thinking that, it's probably because you're already good at your job. But a lot of people are not actually doing at least this. They're like getting caught up in busy work, not the valuable work. They're getting caught up in their own drama, not what their coworker asked them to help with. They're getting caught up in how much their boss made them mad, and so therefore they don't deserve their best, or their minimum yes. And so, I think that it is different. The bare minimum mindset focuses on protecting yourself. Like your job is to look out for number one and it's protect you. And it's coming from like this scarcity mindset of like, I've got to get mine because other people are getting theirs. And instead, we want to say that working with integrity unto the Lord according to his will for what your work should look like, your work life should look like, which we'll get into. You can actually probably hold the same task list as a bare minimum attitude versus an integrity attitude, which is more sponsored by it's giving. It's, I'm going to fulfill all these and do great. And I'll see if they need anything else. And if not, I'm going to go, that's fine. And it's coming from an abundance mindset of like, this is my domain and I'm owning it for the glory of God and the good of others. It doesn't mean that you need to take on other people's work necessarily, though there's times for that when your coworkers are on vacation and parental leave and there's a gap on the team. There are times to bail others out of mercy for the fact that that's probably going to be you one day needing to leave a team. And there's going to be gaps that people cover for you. So I should I get on to the next section, which I am really excited about, which is those biblical references that we talked about. And this is directly pulled from our guy, Jordan Rayner's devotional. It's a 4-part series that he actually wrote in 2019, but still slaps so hard. It's what to do when you don't love your job. Doesn't that just hit? What to do when you don't love your job. And these 4 parts are so encouraging. We're going to highlight 2 of them, but we'll link the 4-part devotional in the description for you to go further into. But gosh, I think all I need to do is read this and let the Bible preach for itself. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 1, starting in verse 1, it says, "Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants regard their own masters as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled." God is calling us to honor and respect all employers, regardless of whether or not they respect us or if we love our jobs or are feeling good about it this week. And I do want to say the biblical context of bondservant is it's like there's a termed bond for like it is an employment contract that has a term. It's not like full on slavery as we understand it more in the modern era. So we are actually all kind of bond servants in a sense, because we are bonded to serve in a way that we're contractually obligated to. Of course, we live if you're in America, you're most likely in an at-will employment situation. So by the grace of God, if you need to leave, you could leave. That's fine. But for the time that you're there, this verse absolutely applies. If you are under the yoke of a boss, let's say, regard your boss as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and his teaching may not be reviled. You have the opportunity to revile God by not honoring your boss. Dang, dog. Dang. This reminds us also in Romans 13, a chapter I think about very, very, very often, particularly in this age of encouraging lawlessness, which I think it's also just like you got to get yours kind of a lack of Christ-likeness in society. We need to remember that even if you don't like the authorities of all kinds that are put over you, in Romans 13, it says there is no authority except that which God has established. And it calls these authorities, particularly in government, your God's servant placed there for your good. And don't we know also by Hebrews 12, our good is we're not always the best judge of what God should be doing for our good. Instead, he decides as a loving father, times of plenty, times of lacking, times of gritty discipline and pushing through, times of loving what circumstances he's given you, times of hating. Ecclesiastes also points to this like seasonality of God's definition of good is likely not something that you would ever be able to understand, even if he explained it to you, because he's infinite and his thoughts are above our thoughts. But God therefore has put our bosses in positions of power, and our response should be to honor and respect them, even if they are responsible for making our jobs miserable. I'm not saying that you have to stay there forever. I would love for Audrey, you so well suggested that our next episode should be about when to quit, because we're not saying don't quit, but even if you have decided to leave a bad situation, which you are allowed to do, free will exists. Okay, that's fine. I don't, unless God has impressed a particular instruction on your heart, you are most likely free to stay or go, really. But while you are there, it does take some time even to exit. It takes some time to turn in your notice. It takes some time to get a new job. And so even if you have the intent to leave, your job is still to honor your boss and your coworkers and your customers and your clients. Next, let's go on to Colossians 3:22 through 24. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. If you don't like your boss, realize that they're just like a ugly filter between you and Jesus. And you could actually look through your boss at Jesus and say, that is who I am serving. And even if you don't deserve it, that actually just, you don't deserve my best because you're a disgusting boss. You are going to remind me daily to preach the gospel to myself that if it were not for the Lord, without the Lord, I am utterly depraved. Even if I only committed one sin, would be deserving of death and apart from the grace of God. But Jesus died for them and me. Therefore, we can see some commonality, even if I have to really fight for it. And Paul is reminding us that even when we are dissatisfied with our jobs, our bosses, our employers, we are to work with everything that we've got, because ultimately we aren't working for human masters. We're working for the Lord who provided our job in the first place for some reason that we might not understand. Hard work is a God honoring response to a job you do not love, which makes it good in and of itself. I would like to point you more towards the devotional series so you could hear Jordan flesh that out a little bit more. But again, I'm not saying stay in that forever. You don't have to be a martyr. But while you are in it, let's keep this attitude. We often pray with clients as we're helping them get new jobs. I love the beauty of their hearts. Clients will often say, "Can you pray for me? I'm struggling to not quiet quit and just be on my way out and let things slide." And my gosh, I feel like I am praying for a saint, because I am, when I pray that for them. I love it. I love it. It's such a beautiful way to think. So as Christians, we aren't called to work with integrity only when leadership deserves it. I think that's really the landing point here. Integrity is more about, it's just always a deserved response, because the Lord deserves our best wherever we're at. And as we fulfill that command, asking for his strength, because that is just, Jesus himself said in the Gospels, I think in the Sermon on the Mount, as he was sharing all these things that are just flatly impossible for us to perfectly obey in our flesh, he said, yeah, this is impossible without God, but you have me. Hardcore paraphrase. But with God, these things are possible, I think that he said. So Jesus understands that this is a backbreaking command, but ask the Holy Spirit to carry you through your tasks and see what miracle he has for you there. Audrey, I think it's finally time to unwrestle the mic from myself and give it to you for the remainder of these points.
Yeah, so all of that scripture is so important. So you know that we're not just talking over here. We are talking from the instruction that the Lord has given us for how to operate in these situations. Practically speaking, from that, a really easy question to ask yourself. Actually, maybe it's not an easy question, but putting it in the form of a question hopefully makes it easier to test. Where do you stand right now in your integrity? How are you showing up in integrity at work right now? I want you to ask yourself, if your employer watched a recording of your workday, would you feel comfortable with what they saw? Ooh, if they watched a recording of your workday, would you feel comfortable? I would not be able to answer yes to that at all points in my life, for sure. So there's that, but it gets right to it. It cuts all the cuts right to the point. I guess I'll say it that
it's
way.
very confronting.
Yes, confronting. Integrity means working honestly, not manipulating expectations and not intentionally underperforming. So that means even if the company is big, if they make a lot of money and leadership is imperfect, as we were just talking about.
Yeah.
My own personal story here. So I came from big corporate. I totally had the mentality of, it's my time. I don't need to do all these things. The bare
It's a
minimum
rich
that we talked about.
company.
Right. I had that in me and I didn't even know. And then I switched to a very small company where my boss is also a very good friend of mine, and I can see
Hey.
exactly how, yes, sitting right here, I can see exactly where the money that I'm being paid is coming from, and it's much more personal. And that was very confronting to me. Like, I am not charging time that is not, I'm not actually spending working. That was a real shock to my system, and it was really hard at first. So I did switch from being salaried to hourly, and that helped also be very confronting. And wow, doing this much work, doing 7 hours of work, which is what I try to do every day, it's hard. At first, it was really hard because I was not performing that way at my corporate job. And that awareness was really convicting, but also helped me to intentionally actually address this integrity in my work style. How do I make sure I'm showing up every day and doing good work? Make sure I stop my little timer that I have for logging my hours, stop it when I go for a walk or I go grab a coffee, or all these things that are not work. And that is a difference between being hourly versus being salaried. But if you're salaried, you still should be spending that time working. We'll get into a little bit more of that in a second. But I also want to say that this shift really helped me see how unintentionally I was drifting during the workday, and how easy it was to drift unintentionally, especially when working from home. Especially when working from home. So this is a great exercise in clarity because it forces you to just address it, like we said, straight on, and it highlights the difference between feeling busy and actually working. Going back to what you were saying earlier, Kelsey, of that advice from your professor, like, don't just put boxes around, actually do work.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing, a small tidbit here. Read this once and it really affected me. Since we work on screens, a lot of us work on screens all day, every day. When we look at our phone screen as a break, it actually doesn't register in our brain as a break because it's a screen. So it registers as more work when you are scrolling Instagram as your break. So we feel so exhausted because we're not even giving ourselves real break when we take these small breaks throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And doing this exercise, this unintentional exercise in integrity, was so helpful for me. And I really do recommend that y'all ask yourself this question and work through this internally. And I pray that it helps you come out of this hypervigilant state that, if you find yourself in, I was in it, of, I hope they don't find out. I hope my boss doesn't find out how much I'm actually not working. Because it even got so bad, I would brag about it. I would brag about how much I didn't need to work and how much money I was making when I wasn't working. This is at my corporate job. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to that past
It's
job.
understandable. It's very acceptable in our culture. But I think that the beauty of working for a small business, at least for a time in your career, is it's not different. You weren't not stealing from your last employer. It's just more confronting and personal. But just because a company is very large doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't feel stolen from, because who is he? He's the person that is your boss. He's the person that is on the street, like Jesus was saying kind of in Matthew chapter 25. And so Jesus hurts, even if the situation you're in a large company doesn't feel like they're hurting when you're stealing. And you don't have to, I'm not, as somebody who's self-employed and was homeschooled, I very much actually buck against the, like, I'm checking how many hours I'm working. But I think that's also just like, if you choose to be self-employed, you are not self-employed, Audrey. I think that's like a good mindset for you to have. But for me, I just want to speak from my side of things is, you are still accountable to someone. So instead of saying, would my boss be comfortable with how I'm spending my time? Would my clients feel comfortable with how I'm spending my time? Would they feel honored with what the behind the scenes actually looks like, is more the question. And I focus more on like letting all my yeses be yes, delivering the value that they're hoping for. And so if you're in a job that is more like outcomes focused rather than time input focused, there's room for that too. But just make sure that you're honoring your task list. And if you finish early, and you're legitimately done with everything, then you can take back that time as a reward. But it goes both sides. I think that you'll know in your heart of hearts as you're listening if Audrey's example is more fitting for your situation or my example is more fitting for your situation.
Mm-hmm. And another practical thing you can do here is you can download the Toggle app. That's what I use, Toggl. I think it's free, right, Kelsey?
Mm-hmm. It's free. Toggle track.
And Toggle track, and you can just track, you can assign projects to and track time in each project. See how much time you are focusing on projects at work or meetings or email. And maybe it comes back that you're doing 40 hours of work, and that's great. Maybe it comes back that you're actually only doing 20 hours of work. That quantitative data can be really helpful and just take you out of your head a little bit and give you practical information to work with. So I
Do
think
not be so dramatic about what you're doing.
yes.
Yeah. I know that we, per our usual theme, are running up against our next meeting time. So, what are some of the final things that you'd like to address for listeners on this topic?
What are the final things I want to address?
Okay. So you said you're going to recommend that people track their work tasks just for accountability purposes, and then also reflect. You could reflect on, am I being faithful to with the time I'm being paid for? Am I intentionally doing the bare minimum? Do I resent my employer in a way that's affecting my integrity and generosity? Am I seeking a detox season, or am I trying to escape responsibility? And this, I think, last caution gets into what I really was wanting you to cover, because whenever a client comes that wants just a cushy escape job, I think that you so beautifully validate their desire for a detox without indulging their desire to take a break while still getting paid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've found through those conversations that most people don't truly want to slack off or do the bare minimum, even if they believe some of the damaging narratives that we've already shared. Sometimes they just don't have the right language, and a lot of times they're trying to say something like, hey, I've had an extremely demanding job for the last 10 years, and I need something less draining so I can prioritize other parts of my life better than I'm able to do right now. That's reasonable for
none of that is a problem.
many people. Yes, that's very, very reasonable. This often happens in high demand jobs, like investment banking was one that came to mind for me, or ministry. I see it a lot in ministry and other fields as well. But determining the difference is important between, like you said, the kind of a break job, which is more problematic language, versus a detox job, which can be a better way to describe it. So a break job is that mindset of, I want to get paid, but not really have to try. I want to get paid a lot, have the cushy job, be in the corporate job, not have to do a lot. What we were talking about earlier. Small tidbit here, not small, big tidbit. Any work you're being paid for should not be a break. So what people I find are trying to communicate here is that they're actually looking for more of a detox role, which means it's a job that is less emotionally draining or physically draining or mentally draining. It has clear boundaries than maybe what they've been working in previously, and it requires less overall intensity again in that emotional, physical, or mental state, or maybe all three. And also what this detox job does is it allows you for some recovery after a very demanding season, after a very demanding career, whatever it might be. And if this is you, that is absolutely something that we can help you with. If you're looking for more of the break job, we can talk through that, but we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you get a break job. It's not, that is not aligned with what we
are saying. I want you to help me scour the country to find an employer that's a sucker and is just going to pay me a whole bunch for not doing a lot, which gives me the ick so hard. But yeah, detox job is completely normal. Like, you're going to have seasons of life that are more personally demanding. You're going to have times of being legit called by God to pick up more in your personal life and put down more in your professional life. I just would encourage you to adjust to a position where you could still let your yes be yes, just work for a company that wants less from you and probably is paying you less, and that's fine. Go there. And if they're happy with your work and you're happy with the amount of inputs that are required from you so that you could focus on the things that God is calling to you to in your personal life, hallelujah. We help people with that all the time. It is completely fair to not have to see work as all striving, all burnout, all 110%. That's just like a recipe for death, honestly.
So come and talk to us. We have a link in the description of this episode to schedule a consultation call. And just as we're closing out this episode, I want to remind listeners that this conversation we're having can actually feel kind of radical in today's world, especially, I mean, around Christians. Yeah, around the world for sure. But even around Christians, there's so much misdirection and narratives that just get things all murky. Working with integrity builds character, builds trust. It's redeeming work, and it builds your reputation and long-term opportunity as well in your relationship with the Lord, which is the most important thing overall. So we're going to wrap up for today, but tune in next week because we're going to talk about, okay, what if all of this means that I actually need to quit my job and find that next one? How do I make that decision?
Yeah, totally. I'll close with a quote from Jordan Rayner, since we were mentioning him earlier. He said, one time I heard him say, I am fully convinced that 90% of our time in front of the judgment seat is going to be Jesus being just reviewing all the instances where we did not let our yes be yes. And I was like, wait, that is the craziest thought. It's not like that time that you murdered someone or slapped your sister in the face. It's like, no, you just totally did not love your brother or your sister or your client well in your job. And I thought that was hilarious. Let's close there and we'll talk again soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. To get an even more meaningful head start into your calling, head to thecalledcareer.com, where my fellow career coach Audrey and I have created a whole suite of free resources and tools to help you get clear and get a job today. For those who are definitely ready to land a job or start a business in the next 6 to 12 months, we're here to help you biblically and practically discern your calling through coaching, reflection, and deep market research. Identify the job that's aligned with it, even if you currently have no idea what you want. Rebrand your resume and LinkedIn to translate your background to appeal to your future boss. P.S. We take this off your plate and do this for you. Also, we'll teach you how to land referrals and get attention from leadership through networking. Again, if that makes you nervous, we have these emails and LinkedIn messages literally written for you so you don't have to sweat. We're also here to give you unlimited interview practice so you're prepared to address every elephant in the room and knock selling yourself out of the park. Then we'll round out with helping you negotiate your salary so you land thousands more. Just so you know, recent clients have gotten $8,000 to $50,000 salary increases, even though they were totally non-traditional candidates. That's because we specialize in helping non-traditional career pivoters land jobs they're ecstatic to serve in. It takes work, but we're here to see you through until the end, when we're celebrating that day that you send me an email in all caps and you say, Kelsey, I got the job. Then you could be on the podcast. But I'll be here until then, keeping you accountable and encouraged by meeting with you literally until you land the job you want, even if that's up to 6 months from now within our program. Apply to join at thecalledcareer.com, and I'll see you next week here at Answer the Call. Bye for now.